Welcome to literary and jury charge practice. Let's get started with some literary material. Let's see, this is our Who Moved My Cheese story. Ready? Here we go. Later, as Ha looked back on things, he realized that the cheese at cheese station C had not just disappeared overnight, as he had once thought. The amount of cheese that had been there toward the end had been getting smaller, and what was left had grown old. It didn't taste as good. Mold may even have begun to grow on the old cheese, although he hadn't noticed it. He had to admit, however, that if he had wanted to, he probably could have seen what was coming, but he didn't. Ha now realized that the change probably would not have taken him by surprise if he had been watching what was happening all along, and if he had anticipated change. Maybe that's what Sniff and Scurry had been doing. He stopped for a rest and wrote on the wall of the maze, "Smell the cheese often, so you know when it is getting old." Sometime later, after not finding cheese for what seemed like a long time, Ha finally came across a huge cheese station which looked promising. When he went inside, however, he was most disappointed to discover that the cheese station was empty. We'll get to some jury charge practice. Some of the words that we have in this jury charge, we have complaint, alleged, alleges, illegal, affidavit, affidavit, All right, let's give this one a try. Ready? The rest of the complaint sought to hold the defendant liable based solely on an alleged association with certain organizations. The complaint alleges that the defendant provided material support to the violent organization. The material support that the defendant is supposed to have provided is defined as the person of the defendant. In other words, the complaint is alleged that by participating in the activity, the defendant was supplying material support in the form of his person. He was the material support that is alleged in the complaint. The complaint alleges that the defendant provided himself as material support. The defense noted that the complaint quoted parts of an interview with the defendant conducted after he was taken into custody. He said that the affidavit failed to state that the defendant did not see anything that went on. The complaint seeks to hold the defendant liable based on the alleged association with certain organizations. It is necessary for the individual to possess interest to further illegal aims. The defense holds that there is no evidence, nor does the affidavit allege that the defendant ever took part in any conduct by the named organization. The defense goes on to say that there is no evidence that the defendant had any intent to further any illegal objectives of those organizations. In fact, the affidavit alleges the defendant did not train, nor did he take part in any illegal conduct. With this in mind, he said that there is no probable cause to find that the defendant violated the statutes under which he is charged. right, let's have some literary practice now. Sometime later, after not finding cheese for what seemed like a long time, Ha finally came across a huge cheese station which looked promising. When he went inside, however, he was most disappointed to discover that the cheese station was empty. This empty feeling has happened to me too often, he thought. He felt like giving up. Ha was losing his physical strength. He knew he was lost and was afraid he would not survive. He thought about turning around and heading back to Cheese Station C. At least, if he made it back and Hem was still there, Ha wouldn't be alone. Then he asked himself the same question again. What would I do if I weren't afraid? He was afraid more often than he liked to admit, even to himself. He wasn't always sure what he was afraid of, but in his weakened condition, he knew now he was simply fearful of going on alone. Ha didn't know it, but he was running behind because he was weighed down by fearful beliefs. Let's finish this jury charge. Excuse me. All right, ready? He is charged with certain violations of statutes. In other words, he did not participate in any conspiracy. He did not commit any crime against the people of the United States. The defense also alleges that the alleged statements made by the defendant were made under highly coercive circumstances. Because the alleged statements were made under these circumstances, the statements are inadmissible. He indicated that the defendant had been injured during this period. The defense also indicated that the defendant has no criminal record of any kind. He had no record of any drug use. He was taken into custody without being given his rights. Since the defendant has no criminal record, the defense asked that the defendant be released either on his own recognizance or not. The attorney for the defense argued that there was no probable cause to find that the defendant violated the statutes under which he is charged. He also said that the term personnel, as used in a particular code section, was vague. They said that it violated the Constitution. A proffer was used to allege that the defendant was coerced into his statements and corroborated in part by press reports. A proffer is an offer of evidence. The attorney used a proffer to allege that he was coerced into his statements. The defendant's parents offered to pledge that the defendant would attend all court sessions. The court has the discretion in granting this request. The court makes the decision of whether the defendant is to be allowed to be released on his own recognizance. All right, we did have a few words in there that we might want to practice. We had coercive, inadmissible, recognizance, Constitution, proffer, corroborated, all right. So let's take just a couple more minutes here and we'll read a little bit of our literary material. Ready? Here we go. Ha wondered if Hem had moved on, or if he was still paralyzed by his fears. Then Ha remembered the times when he had felt his best in the maze. It was when he was moving along. He wrote on the wall, knowing it was as much a reminder to himself as it was a marking for his buddy, him, hopefully to follow. Movement in a new direction helps you find new cheese. Ha looked down the dark passageway and was aware of his fear. What lay ahead? Was it empty? Or worse, were there dangers lurking? He began to imagine all kinds of frightening things that could happen to him. He was scaring himself to death. All right, that will conclude our literary and jury charge practice. Thank you.